I'm Stevie, and today I'm gonna diagnose healthcare. So this video is gonna have two parts. First one, I'm going to give you examples and prove to you that doctors are in fact dickheads, douche salads, murderers, what have you. And then the second part of the video, I'm going to give you 5 things that you can do as a person who has one or more marginalized identities to help you get the healthcare that you are owed. Here's the timestamp you can skip to if you're just looking for advice on how to navigate an abusive healthcare system. You still here? Great. So I'm not saying that all doctors are dickheads all of the time. Just to be clear, hashtag not all doctors. Not only is so much of what we know about medicine and healthcare deeply rooted in white supremacy, but unfortunately, growing up in the culture that we grow up in, everyone is socially conditioned to believe certain things about themselves and others. These conditioned beliefs are called implicit bias. And because our society is especially racist, transphobic, sexist, homophobic, and a bunch of other obics, in turn our doctors end up having those same implicit biases. These beliefs are dangerous for anyone in any profession, but in a profession where people's lives are literally in your hands, it can be the difference between life and death. So exactly who is affected by all of this? Well, if you're one of the people that are, you probably already know. But let's just go through it just for funsies. Discrimination against women in medicine. Misogyny in medicine has existed probably since before bloodletting was in style. In fact, periods were called bloodletting until the early 90s. That's a joke, I think. The Romans thought female hysteria was caused by horniness. Greeks thought the uterus would dry up and move around the body to get more moisture. And the supposed cure for what ails ya? Why, marriage and motherhood, of course. After all, who needs penicillin when you have penicillin? Penicillin! Until the 1920s, hysteria was treated by inserting vibrators into patients. And in 1980, hysteria was renamed to conversion disorder. So, conversion disorder, hypochondria, functional neurological disorder, and fibromyalgia. Those diagnoses are things that doctors use to avoid having to have a thorough examination of their patients and their symptoms, particularly for women. That is not to say that all of those are not legitimate and real diagnoses. They are. But they are also common diagnoses doctors just throw at a patient when they don't actually know what's going on and don't want to press on any further. Looking for the easy road out. But you know what's an even easier road out? The doctors listening. Clutching your Penn State medical degree close to your heart and saying, I don't know what's wrong. Here's another person you can talk to that is a specialist that might be able to help. Discrimination against people of color in medicine. There is a long, horrifying history of testing and experimenting on people of color. Mutilation, torture, and violent body horror has been done all in the name of medicine. I'll put a link down below to a book called Medical Apartheid that you can read to educate yourself if you're not aware, because I'm not going to go into detail because we're not going to trigger people of color today in this video. So, an immense history of racism in this country, and particularly in healthcare, has led to patients of color not being believed when they are sick or in pain. In a survey in 2016, 40% of first and second year medical students endorsed racist beliefs such as Black people's nerve endings are less sensitive than white people's, Black people's skin is thicker than white people's, and that Black people's blood coagulates more quickly than white people's. Hopefully during their residency, students got to work in the don't be a fucking asshole unit, but I'm not optimistic. By the way, the don't be a fucking goddamn asshole you asshole unit is called this for short. So look into it. People of color are fetishized and hypersexualized based on the color of their skin and stereotypes that frame their bodies as less than their white counterparts. While these biases often go unspoken, there are videos of doctors readily admitting that they don't take Black women seriously when they're in pain, or that they prescribe fewer pain prescriptions to Black people because they think that they're lying or will abuse the pain meds, or that they don't need them at all. People of color are often forced to learn how certain symptoms present on their bodies because medical textbooks only show how symptoms present on white bodies. Symptoms can and do present differently on dark skin than they do on light skin. If entire classes of future medical professionals are being taught with racist ideas, or even without people of color in mind, the cycle of mistreatment will inevitably continue. There are so many recent textbooks, and seeing how recent they are really shows that that racist ideals are going to be reinforced and continue. Discrimination against queer people in medicine. Considering that being gay or transgender was considered a disease until terrifyingly recently, it is no surprise that queer people are heavily discriminated against in medicine. The World Health Organization only declared being transgender as not a mental illness in 2019. Homosexuality was removed as a disease from the DSM in 1973 and the ICD in 1992, but prejudices are alive and well. During the AIDS crisis in the 80s, barely anything was done to support those affected, and this was directly because of the homophobia ingrained in politicians, medical professionals, and the general public. People believed that AIDS only affected gay men, and therefore it wasn't worth their time. Repeat after me, everyone. Fuck Ronald Reagan, fuck Ronald Reagan, fuck Ronald Reagan. That felt good. But it would feel even better if hundreds of thousands of people in my community weren't discriminated against by fucking bigoted douche salads. But I'll say fuck Ronald Reagan over and over again in the meantime. Even today, many medical professionals have no idea how to interact with queer people. We're asked if we're sexually active, meaning, do you have a vagina and are you putting a penis inside of it? I don't know how straight sex works. A doctor once wrote under form of birth control in my medical chart, LGBT. I love being a lesbian and gay and bisexual and transgender because it helps me prevent unwanted pregnancy. Trans people can search for years or decades to find one doctor who doesn't just negate their entire existence. Apparently, it can be a lot to ask a medical professional to not use damaging, incorrect, or harmful language, or to understand your body. There's also the constant use of male and female as the only two options in countless studies and textbooks and just even the fucking form that you fill out to go and see a doctor, when questions could easily be rephrased to help foster an environment where no one is left behind. Sweeping generalizations about gender are not only triggering to trans people, but also detrimental to the medical process itself. In 2015, 80% of first-year medical students expressed implicit bias against gay and lesbian people, and 50% expressed explicit bias against them. Healthcare discrimination against LGBTQ+ people can result in people putting off going to the doctor or withholding important information in fear of being treated differently. Fuck, I'm so mad! Alright, let me just repeat my daily affirmation really quick. Fuck Ronald Reagan. Fuck Ronald Reagan. Fuck Ronald Reagan. Okay, that made me feel better already. Discrimination against fat people in medicine. The discrimination against women's health issues is similar to people who have fat bodies. Instead of, I'm sorry, your lady brain is making your organs have cat fights with each other and it's making you think you feel like your appendix is bursting, but I have a Yankees game to go to at 7, so I'm pretty sure you just have a cold. Fat people get, you just need to lose weight. Have you considered baseball? I have a game at 7, so get out of my office. Body mass index, or BMI, is calculated by taking someone's height and someone's weight and then putting it into a thing, and then it gives you a number. It's also an incredibly inaccurate measurement of body fat content and health. It doesn't take into account muscle mass, bone density, overall body composition, and race and gender differences. So not only is BMI just fucking wrong, it's just wrong. People of a BMI of 30 or higher can expect to pay more each month for their health insurance and their life insurance. Health insurance for obese people costs 25 to 50% more than coverage for people with a BMI below 30. So even though it's, again, wrong and inaccurate, it is being used to discriminate against people. It was even used in the We Fit. Who is that We Fit board to be judging me anyway? All it does is get stood on. Not trying to kink shame, but find a new hobby. With this in mind, the word obese doesn't actually make any sense. A perfectly healthy person could be considered obese according to their BMI. But also not to mention that unhealthy people deserve medical care too. Even if someone's BMI means that they're unhealthy, which we just found out it doesn't. Even if it did, why would that mean that they're not entitled to you actually investigating their symptoms? A lot of the time, fat people are told that they need to change their size before they're even examined for anything else. Weight bias is so common in the medical industry. And doctors have a tendency to misdiagnose eating disorders because they have an idea of what people's bodies are supposed to look like when someone has one. Eating disorders are the single most deadly mental illness. So while these biases are wildly emotionally and psychologically damaging, they also literally cost lives. And surprise, doctors can actually pretend that telling you to lose weight or gain weight to get to a healthy BMI, in my experience, is treatment and charge your insurance for it. Hey, you need to gain or lose weight. Here's your bill. People in healthcare have to unlearn this because this work is the difference between life and death. Discrimination against mentally ill and disabled people in healthcare. Some slight good news is that in recent years, doctors are beginning to take mental health more seriously. But with that being said, many medical professionals do not understand how mental health plays a role in physical health and vice versa. For example, someone who weighs a certain amount or has a certain BMI might be told to lose some weight, like I just said earlier as an example. But if they have an eating disorder, being told to lose some weight only does psychological damage and does nothing to get to addressing the actual problem. Those diagnosed with somewhat rarer mental illnesses like BPD or bipolar or schizophrenia find it a lot harder to get diagnosed or treated by a general practitioner or even referred to a specialist that can help. By the way, rare doesn't necessarily mean bad. Rare Pokemon are the best Pokemon. Just look at your brain as a Pokemon. Your brain is legendary. It can electrocute people. These are horrific and deadly stats if you are a person who belongs to one of these identities. But if you have intersections of them, it can be near impossible to get medical care. Also, I kept getting diagnosed with mental health diagnoses when I was going to doctors who do not specialize in mental health. They don't specialize in it. Oh, you have headaches every day? You must have depression. Stamp. Like, what the fuck is going on? So at the beginning of this video, I said I was going to diagnose healthcare, and I am diagnosing it with I'm not qualified to diagnose, but neither were most of the doctors that talked to me, so I'm diagnosing healthcare with a serious case of lethal implicit biases. I'm afraid the only treatment option is complete and total reform. Okay, hi! 5 steps to help you take control over your treatment and care. Now that we've gone over just some of the ways that marginalized people are neglected in medicine, here are 5 pieces of advice from your resident queer disabled woman on how to get the care you actually need. So my number 1 absolute life-changing, changed everything for me tip is don't go to the doctor alone. Bringing a friend or family member not only is comforting if you've had medical trauma, but also they can provide backup if your doctor tries to discredit you or doesn't believe your symptoms. In those moments, having someone who has witnessed what you're talking about and willing to stand up for you means everything. And be sure to talk to others about your symptoms. Boy, do I know that you may be experiencing something that you think is completely normal, but it is something that you should definitely be bringing up at your appointment. Number 2 is keep track of your symptoms. I can't remember shit. Some people think that is due to trauma. Oh, so document your symptoms if you can. Make a cute little pocket notebook where you document your poop. Anyone who steals your purse will be in for a fun surprise. 3, either record your appointments or take notes for later so that you can review it when you have more time or energy. Especially do this if you think that they might be talking over you or they might be using terminology that you don't understand, which for me is both. I don't know what the hell they're talking about, but I can Google it later if I record it. Ask for copies of your records. Ask for copies of your test results. And ask for copies of any imaging that they do, whether that be an ultrasound or an x-ray. If you feel like something is off, specifically look at the diagnosis codes on your chart to make sure that the things they're actually diagnosing you with match what they're saying to your face. I have made that mistake in the past. Then compare all of that to your insurance statement to see that that is what is actually being billed for. Just saying. You can find out all kinds of shit that way. Number 4. I think this one is the most important. I might have said that about everything else, but this one is the most important. If you are struggling to get them to take you seriously and this is like a last resort, or just do it all the time. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I should start doing this every single appointment. This is what actually got me my diagnosis or my referral to actually get diagnosed. Ask them to write it in your file when you've brought some concerns to them and they brush it off. Here's an example. Hi, Dr. Douchebag. I would like you to write it in my chart that I have come to you with the sensation that my stomach is exploding, and you have just told me it's a case of the owies. Could you give me a copy of that after you put it in my chart? Oh, also, can you write that you haven't done any physical examinations or testing, or given me any referrals to a stomach explosion specialist? At best, they will feel challenged enough to actually do something about your stomach exploding. And at worst, you will have some kind of record of how you've been treated so far. Unfortunately, sometimes to get adequate care, doctors need to feel like you're not gonna let them push you around. It fucking sucks, but sometimes you have to be a pain to get doctors to acknowledge your pain, apparently. You have to cause them pain for them to be like, oh wait, maybe you are having headaches. So 5, if they're dismissing your concerns, don't be afraid to ask for someone else. And I know that depending on where you are in the world and what insurance you have, you might not be able to go to someone else. But you may be able to find patient advocate services through your insurance. The internet is also a great resource. Come here, you want to be on camera? The internet is also a great resource before you go and visit certain medical professionals. I used something called ZocDoc.com back in the day. I'm not sure if that still exists or is accurate. Take online reviews with a grain of salt, but if you're constantly seeing, slightly negative reviews on a doctor's review site or Google or whatever, then chances are you should avoid them. There's no foolproof way to know if a doctor is a good doctor before you go and see them, obviously. But I feel like if you are able to see how many reviews they have, develop a kind of an idea of what they're like before you go in. Even if they are a doctor that has every implicit bias under the sun, at least you'll be prepared. Because as someone who is marginalized, going to the doctor and asking for help could be something that easily could re-traumatize you. I get it. It's extremely vulnerable. So it's important to have plans and expectations. And even if you've done all of those things and you get frustrated, just repeat my mantra. Fuck Ronald Reagan. Fuck Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan. I don't know if that'll help you get care, but it might help you feel better on the inside. So last time I made a video about this, we got hashtag doctors are dickheads trending. So this time, let's get hashtag doctors are douche salads. So use that hashtag and tell me your experience of being marginalized in a doctor's office. I would love to hear it. And all the doctors that are watching this that don't believe me, click all the links in the description and go to that hashtag and see for yourself. In the end, believe in what you're feeling. Know that your symptoms are real and stand up for yourself. A doctor can tell you a diagnosis, but a doctor cannot tell you what you're feeling. They may have had a certain amount of years of medical experience, but they have had 0 years of experience living inside of your body. And this one took me a really long time to learn/believe. But you are worthy of being cared for. Medicine isn't only for the rich. Sometimes we have to fight for what we're owed. Thank you so much for watching. This Pride season, I will be donating my AdSense to the Ochre Project. You can find info about them in the description if you would like to make an additional donation. And if you want to join my Patreon family to help me continue making videos like this, click the link in the description and join my Patreon family. Thanks to these wonderful babes for continuing to support me. I love all of you. Bye.